Folks, today's video is very special. I had a chance to contact Keith Howland. He has been kind enough for me to get kind of like an interview session or a lesson. I want to feel it like an interview slash sessions type of lesson that wanna to get out his perspective about session playing. Yeah.
This is my seafoam,
Nice.
Tyler.
Very nice.
Got
Yeah.
the Landau humbucker in the bridge, and I forget what the singles are. He changed them a couple times till I got the ones I wanted.
They are great instruments. I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're
Yep.
they're they're well for they're known for that, right? So I know I hear your names and then offering this from Jay Carriga. The Jay is amazing. And he also
Yeah.
has an amazing brother too that it's my also another hero, Dan Carriga. So he's
Oh yeah.
around here. Yeah, he's an amazing player too. But I'm very fortunate to get in touch with you. Very pleased. I've been following you since Chicago 1995 until I believe during the pandemic until 2021, right? You
Yeah.
still play with Chicago until that time, right?
Yep.
So this is an opportunity that I really wanted to, get some insight from you to help me myself and other folks, playing, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I hope I have some good answers for you.
Sure,
But
absolutely. Yeah. One, right? I know that before you started with Chicago, I think like you did a lot of sessions. You live in LA before, right? So in some cases, when I also play sessions or have a songwriting coming, right? Sometimes is getting the ideas quickly, right? And then
sure.
you know, come up with something new with the lyrics, right? It's difficult. It's not something that easy sometimes, right? For example,
Yeah.
like if you do a sessions like with a song and then the songwriter or the session lead comes with a song that you never heard, right? Or maybe you only listen it once and then they come up with something like, okay, you need to fill in this solo on this, right?
Right.
So tell me
Sure.
more about your approach when you do in this situation.
Well, you know what? Early on in my session work, um, I never really wanted to look at a chart for the song,
Oh,
chord chart. I wanted to sit in a control room and listen to the song and sort of find my way by ear to learn the song. A lot of what I was doing was not with a live rhythm section. The rhythm section would already be recorded, so I'd just be doing overdubs. Um, but then as I sort of a little bit later on, I started to find that actually having the chord chart was helpful just for a roadmap. I
mm.
mean, like for example, like back in I guess was it the Wrecking Crew? Um,
Oh yeah, yeah,
I think did they do My Girl? Was it the Wrecking Crew or was
yes.
that the yeah? So I mean, you know, that was come up with on the session. They had a C chord on the chart,
Right, right.
and the guitar player came up with the riff. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. And it used to be kind of an enigma to me as well. I'll share a story that'll give you an idea of what
Mm-hmm.
when when Chicago was recording the song "Here in My Heart," which was on the Greatest Hits, the Red Greatest Hits album.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the producer was James Newton Howard. Okay, and he brought in Michael Landau to play guitar on the session.
Wow.
and I was hurt because I wanted to play on it, but I also consider Michael Landau to be probably the greatest session guitar player that's ever lived. Him, Dan Huff, Luca, um, and then of course a little earlier, Dean Parks, Larry Carlton, and
Right.
those guys. And now you've got some of the Nashville guys, Tom Bukovac, who's great, and um, but so I went down to the recording studio. It was at Conway in Los Angeles, and uh, and I ran into Landau coming into the studio, and we had met and we knew each other, and he kind of looked at me and said, "Hey man, I don't know why I'm here. You should be playing on this." And I was like, "No, it's cool. Obviously, record producers, the guys that their go-to guys, you know, make them comfortable because they know what they're going to get. You know what I mean?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So when David Foster was making a record, in came Jeff Porcaro and in came Steve Lukather, and because he knew he was going to get good stuff quickly, you know. So um, I actually got to sit there and watch Landau put tracks down on the song, and one by one, the producer Newton Howard was kind of feeding him what he wanted. So, okay, double the bass line here with a power guitar sound, and give me some big power chords in the chorus. Now double that. And I'm sitting there and I'm going like, yeah, I could have done that, no problem. Um, and even I was kind of thinking, why am I not playing on this? And then at the end of the session, James told the engineer, he said, just open up a track and let Mike do whatever he wants. And I sat there and I watched Mike Landau play the most interesting, it's kind of buried in the mix, but these lines that were going in between the vocals and little swells and flourishes and
Mm.
different colors and things like that. And that's when I went, that's why I'm not playing on this record. Now, I would not have thought of that, but it really opened my mind up to, because sometimes you have to take chances in the studio to get the best stuff. If you're nervous and you play it really safe, you're not going to get the good stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, making a mistake is not the end of the world. It's like sometimes, like on a solo, my first blush might be the architecture of what the solo is going to be, but there's a couple sections where I didn't like, those 4 bars, or
Mm.
I didn't execute that thing exactly right. So it's like, punch me in on, bar 12, and let me clean that up. And I'm going to play a different idea here and we'll punch in. But the meat and potatoes of it would be there on the first pass. And a lot of the best, and I'm certainly not one of the best, but the best session guys, that's the thing. I know that a lot of guys, the Jeff Porcaros and the John Robinsons, I mean, their first or second take is going to be the money take.
Mm.
And if the producer keeps, pounding on them and making them play it over and over and over and over, you start getting diminishing returns because, now they're starting to think too much and they're not just letting it
Go.
flow out. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So, you know, just a rough chord chart is kind of a nice thing to have, to just sort of be able to see the changes going by, um, and also sometimes certain sounds can almost dictate, a part. Landau's kind of the king of that. He's got that. I don't
Dry
really,
Sierra
I'm
chorus. You're talking about like
not really set up for it, but yeah, that
Tiny account.
delays, track stereo
Yeah.
chorus, yeah, all that stuff. And you know, like Landau and Lukather never play a straight major chord. It's always a nine. You're always getting the
Oh, you got it. Yeah, you got me there. Yeah,
you
you're right.
know. But but well, anyway, um, but it's just some of that little inside stuff that you might. All the old R&B licks and stuff. I don't know if you heard a record called by a guy named Paul Brady called Trick or Treat. Have you heard that record?
Yeah, it was on my
I,
Spotify. Yeah.
what's that? Yeah,
It
I
was on
mean,
my Spotify when I swiping things around. You know how amazing it is today, right? I mean,
oof.
you get
I mean that
references.
that record is so well engineered, and I mean it's Jeff and David Page and Jimmy Johnson
Yeah.
and Landau. I mean, how do you get much better than that? And on that opening track, Soul Child, you can hear Landau's just kind of playing kind of overdriven lead lines
Mm.
through and weaving them throughout the song, and it just I mean it's just a clinic on great session playing. And Tim Pierce is another one. Tim's
Yes.
great,
Yes.
another great session player. um, when I was working for Andy Brower Studio Rentals out in Los Angeles, Andy had Dean Parks and Tim Pierce and Steve Lukather and Carl Verheyen and bass players Neil Steubenhaus and John Pierce. And so I got to go and kind of be a fly on the wall when I was setting up the gear for all these guys. I'd show up a lot of times to pick up Lukather's gear or what Dean Parks or whoever, and they'd be listening to playback of what they had just done, and I sort of slowly pack up the gear so I could listen and hear. I got to hear a lot of really cool stuff before it was released.
Mm.
I heard a couple of the tracks from the Toy Matinee record that Tim Pierce played on.
Mm.
And I heard him in the studio with Pat Leonard standing there on the huge speakers, and then it was just mind blowing to hear that stuff. That's one of the best sounding records of the '90s, in my opinion. They did
Yeah.
it old school. It sounds like it was made in like 1982, as opposed to the early '90s. But I guess I'm sort of digressing on the question at hand. But
No, 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 no. You're totally got get with
yeah,
the
I mean,
charge, right? And then I think like it's you mentioned a really good point. Like the story about like how Lando comes in with the song, right? And then that's the reason that I didn't play that because I didn't think about that, right? I think like being humble and then have that attitude, it's important, right? And then it's the key to play with others, with other collaborators. It doesn't mean that you need to play all the parts, all the song, right?
right. And you know, Tim Pierce wouldn't have played what Landau played. He would have done what Tim does. And Lukather wouldn't have played. Lukather has some of his go to stuff. Um, you know, all the little
That sounds like
unit,
human nature.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
Rosanna.
I don't know it, but
It's all right. I got the
forget,
idea. Yeah.
keep forgetting by Michael McDonald. Same thing.
Yeah.
Um, in and he's also got the textural stuff that Landau does. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those guys grew up together. They went to high school together. Of course, they're going to have similar things. And then Dan Huff comes in.
Yep.
He's kind of learned from those two guys. He was in Nashville, and he wanted to come to LA and do. So Dan could do Luca, he could do Landau, he could do Paul Jackson Jr. So he was this guy that came in all of a sudden, and producers were like, "Well, we can just hire Dan, and he'll give us solos like Luke, rhythm stuff like Landau, and funk stuff like Paul Jackson in one guy." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're all amazing players, and they all have their strengths, and you know, session work is really it's a skill. It really is a skill. If you're a great live player, doesn't mean you're great in the studio, and you just have to do it and do it more and continue to work on it, whether you're doing it in your home studio on your own material,
Mm-hmm.
which I did a lot of. I played on a lot of like just jingle sessions and stuff like that coming up, for
Yeah.
$50 or $75. I'd go in and, it'd be a 30-second little piece of music. And usually the guy had an idea, I want this to sound kind of like Queen,
Mm.
and so you try to cop a Brian May thing, or, there's a lot of that too. A lot of producers will say, I want a Van Halen vibe on this, or so being a bit of a chameleon in the studio is another thing, because sometimes they'll want. It was a great story about about Jeff Porcaro. He was playing on a Ricky Lee Jones track, and Ricky Lee Jones had just done a record with Steve Gadd.
Mm.
So Jeff was playing on the record, and he's playing the track, and Ricky Lee Jones kind of kept going like, well, can you play it a little more like Gad would approach it, you know? And Jeff was working, three sessions a day and having to turn down work. And he basically, the rumor has it that he took out his notepad and he wrote down Steve Gadd and wrote his number down and handed it to her and said, if you want Steve Gadd, call him. He'll be happy to come down and play on your
Right.
record.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of guys that are like trying to come up in the world would never do that. If a producer said,
Mm.
I try to do a Lukather thing on this, I wouldn't say like, well, call Steve. I'd try to do it because I want to be on the
In the
recording.
record. Yeah.
But I guess when you get to that level, it's like, I've heard that from a lot of guys that are the A-list guys that, if it's Tim Pierce and they're saying, give me Steve Lukather, then he'll just say, call Steve, you know, he'll come down. Although nowadays Steve's kind of, he's only doing sessions for friends and
His
things like that.
son. His son does more.
Yeah, he kind of burned
Trevor.
out on the whole
Yeah.
session thing after a while.
But I think I see how you do like your creative process, right? I think like you follow what the producer needs in the problem solving, right? And then you try to come up with something, be courageous just to do that and then do your best. And then yeah, if they like it, great. If they don't, well, what's gonna happen then if they don't?
Well, and sometimes sometimes you may come up with something, and then the producer will say, I like where you're going with this, um, but can you try it a little bit more this way or that way, or can you, play the same part but take some of the chorusing off, make it more straight. And it's like, okay, I can do that. And you know, sometimes producers, um, I won't name any names, but there's a famous session player that had a knob
Yeah,
on
you
his
don't need
instrument
to. Yeah.
he called it the producer knob, and the producer would say, "Yeah, that's not quite the sound I'm looking for," and the knob
Uh,
wasn't connected to anything, so he would just turn it and then play again, and the producer would go, "Yeah, that's it. You got the sound,"
you talking about the bearded bass player, like the Gandalf of the bass
I'm not
player.
naming any names.
Well, we don't mention names. We just like I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
There's lots of bearded bass players.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But sometimes these guys, the producers, you know, they want you to sort of dictate a little bit of, they're hiring you because they're not a guitar player. They're looking for you. I mean, I've gone in and played just basic, power chords in a chorus, and producers are like, wow, that sounds great, and it's like
Yeah.
that's like the most basic.
So Dan Huff said like it's all in the attitude. It was right. It was in the attitude. It was in the what's for the song. And again, I think like when he said it's all about in the attitude, I think it's talking about being humble, being know what
Well,
works. Yeah.
and with session work too, um, the artist and the producer is looking for confidence in the player. Somebody that's going to come in and be like, oh yeah, I got just the thing for this, and then like you said, work quickly and get performances quickly.
Mm.
um, they don't want to sit around and waste too much time, where at home you can spend as much time as you want
That's
on
right.
a track and try to get it. But it's all good. Like I say, session playing to me is no different than any other skill set on the instrument. It's its own thing, you know. Um, it's one thing to uh, get a gig with an artist that has a catalog of music, and then you go learn the music and then perform it live, as opposed to the creative process of actually having to come up with those ideas in the studio. So it's a
Mm.
whole different thing, and it does come with time and practice. You know, I mean, those guys, the LA guys, Luke and Landau and Jeff and Paige. I mean, they were making records when they were 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
Jeff Porcaro, I think, was 17 when he played on, was it Katie Lied, the Steely Dan record?
Mm.
I think he was 17 years old when he made
I don't
that
I don't
record.
recall how old. It even I wasn't born yet.
Yeah, crazy when you hear, but those guys all grew up together, and they were all obviously very gifted, but they also pushed each other, and so
In
the
the good
players
ways.
the players that you surround yourself with will also elevate your play. If they're, Jeff and David Page were older than Luke, and I remember reading that they were working on a tune or something, and Lukather was soloing, and he was kind of rushing a little bit. He was
Mm.
getting up in front of the beat, and Jeff was like, come on, man, just pull it back a little bit. So now Lukather has one of the greatest pockets of any guitar player I've ever heard, and it probably has a lot to do with playing with Jeff Porcaro for all those years.
I see.
You know, because how do you not get good playing with probably the greatest feeling drummer in the history of drumming?
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
so that's sort of my take on that question.
You actually answered two questions already, which is that's great.
What's that?
You actually answered two questions already, which is that's great.
Two
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
Okay.
So the next question that I want to ask here is simple. In the past 6 months, what are new skills that you learned recently?
Well, since I've been doing more freelance playing, especially live stuff, um, I've been digging into a lot of different material that I just songs that I've never played before, and um, so that's been kind of good because I kind of got I wouldn't say complacent, but I had the Chicago gig for 27 years or almost 27. Missed it by a couple of months, but um, and we were working 110, 120 shows a year. So I had that whole catalog of music down. And a lot of times when I would come off the road and I'd have 3 weeks off, I'd barely pick the guitar up just because I'd been out there,
Playing up.
playing and
Yeah.
playing and playing. Um, and So it's kind of fun to get back to like almost like what I was doing when I was a teenager and learning like all these new and different songs. And I've actually been listening a bit to some more jazz fusion stuff, John
Mm.
Scofield and Scott Henderson, and
Do you
some of
also
these.
listen to Cassiopeia?
No, I don't know. Cassiopeia.
That's Japanese.
Oh, okay. I'll
Galactic
check.
Funk. Galactic Funk is a great song. I listened that when I was like 15 or something, and I was like blown away by that jazz fusion. They got like the rock. I think the band that got like a lot of inspiration from Cassiopeia is Dirty Loops.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So they went when they went to Japan, right? And then said like, "What do you want to play? We want to play Cassiopeia." Woo! And then the crowd was like cheering up. But they're like
Wow.
three pieces, right? So the bass player, I think like Hendrik or something like, and then nails like the solo for the guitar, and then
Yeah.
the keys singing, and then the drums is like a killer. It's just like amazing masters, yeah, virtuosos, or you want to call it like three-piece band, but they got the inspiration from Cassiopeia. So that's I listened their music like maybe 2 3 months ago.
Cool.
Their music is very happy. That I will say, very
Yeah.
happy, very happy, very like if you like in the car driving with a car, and then you get like I believe Florida has what I-95 on the east side, right? So
Yeah.
you want to drive that, you got listen some Cassiopeia. I think it would be fun drive.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll check it out.
yeah,
It's,
yeah.
we'd be out on the road and we'd be sitting on a bus. This was back in the days of, well, I guess it was me. At one point, it was myself, Jason, Bill, um, Walfredo. I remember the first time we found Dirty Loops on YouTube, and
Oh,
they were doing a cover of
Justin Bieber.
yes, that was the first thing I heard, Baby,
Yeah.
and we were just sitting there going like, oh Lord have mercy, what is this? And we
Yeah.
just like played it over and over again, going like, these guys are insane. And then Snarky Puppy came out,
Yeah, that's another one.
and that was a whole other ball of wax. Because sometimes, I mean, the way that that band with the size, however many players they have. What's the live thing in the studio? We Live Here, I think it's called. I think the record's called We Live Here, and there's videos for all of it. And they're all in the studio with a live audience, and the audience is all wearing headphones,
Headphones. Yeah,
the
that's right.
headphone
Yeah,
mix.
yeah.
And there's probably like 10 of them, if not 12, in the room. Three guitar players, two keyboard players, six horns, I think, or something ridiculous. But the way they arranged their material, I've never seen a group of musicians that were so mature that nobody steps on anybody else. They all have their place in the arrangement, and the soloists step out when they need to. But ensemble, when you get a big band, it's real easy for guys to overplay and step on somebody else's stuff. I mean, Chicago's a great example of that too. You know, not in the stepping on each other, but in actually being able to find everybody finding their space
Right.
and staying with it. Terry Kath was very smart in playing in a band with a keyboard player. He would play uh, smaller chord voicings.
Mm.
You didn't really hear Terry playing a lot of like big, big, big kind of chord voicings. He would play, just he'd stay out of the way of the left hand of the piano and the bass,
Right, right.
and
In the mid
and
range,
play.
just like what guitar it should sound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're playing in a power trio and it's guitar, bass, and drums, then you
Hmm.
can be Jimi Hendrix and play all kinds of, all the
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
stuff with bottom end and, bigness. But if you're in a band like that, I mean, like I said, the Snarky Puppy stuff, three guitar players, and they're all like staying out of each other's way. It's like really amazing because a lot of times guitar players can be very egotistical and very me.
Idealistic. Idealistic.
Yes.
Yeah, and
So,
yeah, it's the me part. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah.
but
Okay, that's
so
cool.
what was the question again?
About the musical skills that you learned in the past 6 months, but I think like you answer it, like you want to go back in your old references, like you mentioned about jazz fusion, and then also you brought up the ideas of Terry Cat, right? I think like Terry is amazing. I mean, like, yeah, sorry for the
Absolutely.
loss, but but you're right. I mean, like you need to create space for others, right? You mentioned about like Snarky Puppies, right? Probably like in the same arena with Full Pack, right? Corey Wong. Corey is just like, you know,
Yeah.
right? He's like, his
Yeah.
right hand. That's also another skill that I learned recently, right? Outside of being like playing like Dan Huff, like Landau, like all this stuff, right? But the right hand is just try to relax the right hand. That's, I think like you
Well,
hit the points. Yeah.
yeah, and another thing is now that I've started doing online guitar lessons, these guys are challenging me. One guy's like, I want to learn to play funk guitar like this, and he sent me a video of this like teenage girl who's playing funk like nobody's business, and I had to go and like kind of learn what she was doing to show him, and
Yeah.
it was all like like
Nice.
just all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
great. Sounds great.
But
Yeah.
on the jazz fusion thing, though, I'm more like I used to think of jazz as having to learn to play over changes and all the 2-5-1 licks and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
But a lot of what I really gravitate towards is more the guys like Scott Henderson and Schofield and Mike Stern and some of these
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
And a lot of what Schofield does is it's soloing over just static vamps, you know, whether it's a just like a minor thing. You know, and just using even just chromaticism. Like I used to always think that there had to be rhyme or reason to stuff, but sometimes, you know, it can be as simple like as what a sax player would do. You know, just
Yeah.
taking it out a half step and playing the same lick. And it's really a matter of like how you re-enter the harmonic context of, you know, if you go out, you got to come back in effectively.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you
The
stay
dynamics.
out, then it starts to sound wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so but you know, and all that stuff comes into play. Intervals, playing thirds and fourths and sixths, and you know, all that stuff that we've sort of tried to practice over the years. You know. But or even like playing around with the melodic minor scale. And you know, it's a little bit more. It throws that major seven in there that
Mm.
kind of bends your ear against a minor chord, you know, for a second, but then it brings it back in, that kind of thing.
That's your phrasing, right? So you go from the minor going to seven and back to N in minor, so bring back to the home, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
A lot of times I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just
No, I hear you. I hear you.
little piece of greatness that I got from Steve Lukather that eased my mind. So I went to see him at the Baked Potato.
Mm.
He's you know just shredding and playing all these. I would call it rock fusion. You know, the Los Lobotomies thing or the Greg Matheson stuff and that kind of thing. I was lucky enough to be in LA in the late 80s, and every Sunday night you would get some combination of either Lukather or Landau, David Garfield or Greg Matheson,
Mm.
Jeff Porcaro or Carlos Vega on drums,
Oh.
Brandon Fields or Larry Klimas on sax. So you had Charisma, Greg Matheson, Los Lobotomies, and they were all different incarnations of kind of the same guys, and they were kind of interchangeable. Um, and Jimmy Johnson and John Pena would switch off on bass, you know, weekend to weekend, and it was usually on a Sunday night.
Mm.
And I saw some of the most unbelievable stuff I've ever witnessed, you know, musically.
Nice.
That was my music school, was the Baked Potato. Just going and watching those guys, you know, and but being the kid being the young kid that I was, well, a young kid, I was in my mid 20s. I went up to Luca there and I go, man, how do you play over changes? Which is like a big, wide open question. And Luca there looked at me and he goes, hey, man, the blues scale is the best scale. And I was like, okay, all right, I got that. He goes, yeah, man, 98% of what I play is just the blues scale, and
With
I'll pick
that,
it
I
out
agree
a
with
little
that.
bit, but, and I say, but that stuck with me,
I see.
it made me sort of like put down, oh, I have to learn all these different scales and different modes and different this and that. It's more about how do I superimpose, you know, the pentatonic blues stuff
Mm.
over, you know, to make it sound hip. And
Make it
so,
sound hip.
yeah, so
That
that,
happens in the country too, right? So when we go to country, maybe the opening first chord, right? We do pentatonic blues or minor pentatonic, and then for the second verse or the second chord, right? Second triad, we do like major. But that's all I know. Like when it comes into a country, maybe like when it comes into rock back in the days, I think a lot of scales, like unless it's Steve I, right? Steve does a lot of
well, yeah.
mixolydian, right? Lydian scales and some minor pentatonic. But I mean, like, you know, I think the way of how I see it is just depends on the era, which music that or the vibes that you want to play.
Well, it's interesting too, if you go all the way back to like early, pre Beatles country and Western stuff,
Mm.
and bluegrass, those guys are almost playing jazz, because they're soloing and they're outlining all the chord changes that are going by, and they're very aware of the chord structure and playing, mostly inside stuff, but they're really playing the changes. And you watch like Alison Krauss in Union Station, um, Jerry Douglas on Dobro, and
Oh
I
yeah,
can't think of the guy's name, the guitar player with the mustache that does all the flat picking. I mean, he's insane. It's ridiculous, and it falls under the guise of country, but it's hipper than country to me.
yeah,
And her voice is just angelic. You know,
yeah.
I love her voice. But so what else you got?
What are the three qualities that you look when you play with someone?
Oof.
Actually, I want a
Well,
five, but three is fine. Just
I was
three.
going to
Yeah.
say probably the first and foremost most important thing is somebody that actually is listening to all the other musicians, because sometimes you'll get players that are kind of they're listening to themselves, or maybe they're listening to the click track, and they're not really listening to what the other musicians are doing. And to really play music effectively, that is the probably the most important thing is, I see a lot of guys that, on the internet and stuff, they're just amazing, amazing players, but they're in their bedroom, just shredding and playing. And then you put them into a band with a drummer and a bass player and a keyboard player, and they don't know how to integrate necessarily into
Mm.
that situation. I grew up in an era when all you did was get together with your friends in
Play.
somebody's basement and
Yeah.
just play. When I was in junior high school, one of the first bands I was in, um, it was essentially the rhythm section of my junior high school stage band.
Mm.
So, so back then we were casting aside all the horn players, and it was just keyboards, guitar, bass, and drums. And nobody in the group could sing. So I became the singer on the guitar. So I would learn all the vocal melodies and play them. And in a way, I think that helped shape my ear, and it also helped my melodic sense because I was learning you know all these, whether it was Boston or ZZ Top or uh, gosh, back then, trying to remember so many different things. That was probably like 1975, 76, whatever was on the radio at the time. The Eagles, just learning, playing the melody of Hotel California, you know,
Don
it
Felder.
really,
Yeah.
really kind of cool. Um, but So beyond listening, obviously you want somebody who creatively has a different skill set from yourself, maybe, because here's a great example of that. If if you actually want to dive into something and check it out from a purely pop perspective. um, I played for a minute with Patti Smythe,
Mm.
the who sang with Scandal. And then she had a solo career, and she had that big hit with Don Henley, Sometimes Love Just Ain't Enough. Well, that record, which I think was called No Mistakes, I think, um, I did I did the cartage for that record. I took Tim Pierce's gear down. Two guitar players on that session were Rusty Anderson, who plays with McCartney now, and
Yeah.
and Tim Pierce. And they basically tracked that record live.
Oh wow.
And and Rusty is panned in one ear, and Tim Pierce is panned in the other ear. So if you put on headphones and you listen to that record, you can hear those two guys playing off of each other. And Tim has his whole own set of sounds and ideas and things, and Rusty is completely almost polar opposite of Tim. Tim is kind of more inside the box and playing all the meat and potatoes, and Rusty's playing all this ethereal, textural.
Yeah.
Oh, he's really big into um, sonic landscapes and different sounds that he can create with the guitar and harmonics, and so it's really cool to listen to because it there's really not a lot of overdubs. So it's just the two guitar
Right.
players panned left and right. So that's kind of another thing that's cool is if you get because if you get two guys in a room that are both kind of the same animal, it's like why, you're coming up with the same stuff, You want somebody that's different. And I guess three is are they a good hang, you know? Because and like you were talking about Dan Huff, attitude is very important, and being able to get along with other people. If you're, for lack of a better term, a jerk, or just hard to get along with,
Yeah. Difficult.
or you're
Difficult
just
people.
too out there for people, they may put up producers and people may put up with that if you're absolutely a genius and upper echelon. But if you're kind of middle of the road, but your attitude stinks,
Yeah.
you know, you're gone. But the guys that really are at the very top, they have great attitudes and they're great musicians. So yeah, it's important. Like working with Tris and Bowden for all those years. Tris is just like a ray of sunshine. He walks in the room and his smile like lights up the room, and
Yeah.
yeah, come on, let's go, let's do this, and he's just,
It's radiant, right?
and he's having fun,
Yeah.
and that's what other players want to be around.
Yeah.
Hey man, let's crush this, let's have a good time, and not like weird and dark, nothing like that. But I don't know, I guess that's three things.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Listen, don't be a jerk. and and
Come with a different
play well with
experience.
others. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wrap. That's mainly it's all about Keith. So we learned today about it's all in the attitude. Keith also said the same thing. And then one of the greatest takeaway here is when we really wanted to play 80s or type of 90s or any kind of music, I guess, it comes also with the attitude, right? Just think about, especially in the session, think about like how we get the things quickly and then come up with ideas. And then Keith also said like it comes with experience. Well, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I hope you guys get something out of it, and stay tuned for more interesting video, and thank you for watching.